The moon was full and shining bright, and there I was in the heat of the night. I found this place I'd like to go, even though it's far from home. It all made sense as I watched the crowd, the things I heard. This place was wild. The lights were low, people everywhere, sounds of love screaming through the air. It was there I fell in love. It was there I found my passion flowing, and far from my mind was the world I left behind. I used to think how it would be to find someone who needed me, and it was there my dream came true, 'cause it was there that I met you.
Welcome back to Memories of a Musician. I'm your host, Vito DeSalvo. Again, this evening we have a great program for you featuring a longtime friend and associate, Lorry Yednak. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Lorry in a moment. I want to thank you, first of all, our audience for tuning in and each week, and our audience is growing each week, and we appreciate that, because it's important to hear these stories and the memories of all these great musicians that we're introducing as guests on our show. So we appreciate that. Lorry Yednak I've known for a long time, mainly because of his association with the progressive music company store, retail store, one of the largest in the Allegheny County area, southwestern Pennsylvania, really. And of course, they provided instruments, instrument repair, the lessons. They had music lessons in that building originally, where, by the way, I studied myself part of the time there with one of the teachers there, Matty Shiner, who was my professor at Duquesne University. But, Lorry was a guy that many professional musicians and music educators relied on heavily for providing equipment. If you were a professional in the business and you needed a certain equipment, Lorry was the go-to guy. And then if, in the music education industry, I can't even begin to say how many schools that Progressive serviced in terms of either renting the instruments to beginning students, and also for the repairs of instruments. It's probably an endless number. And of course, they had a whole staff, but Lorry was always there. He was always answering the phone, always at the store, and he was a fixture there, and eventually became the owner of that business. So I'm going to give you a little bit of official background here. Lorry Yednak graduated from McKeesport High School. His father, Loris Yednak, who had a profound influence on Lorry, was a professional musician who played the piano and was a 45 member of the Musicians Local. Lorry's father played in the Army Jazz Big Band in World War II. So it was full circle when Lorry provided the sound reinforcement for the Marine Air Wing Jazz Group. After starting drums in 1961 for the McKeesport drill team, Lorry continued to grow as a musician and began marching in Junior Drum Corps. His lifelong friend and mentor, Mike Blazer, later encouraged Lorry to march with the Pittsburgh Rockets Drum Corps. Lorry's first teaching experience was with Penn Trafford High School under Emery Toth. Lorry then taught in many different schools, including Baldwin, East Allegheny, McKeesport, Elizabeth Forward, Clare Springs, Moonsboro, and Williamsport, all in Maryland, Springford, Northside Urban Pathways, and the University of Pittsburgh. Lorry also played drum set on the weekends with many different bands, including the Castaways, the Dukes, the Musical Knights, and Devin Smill's hot metal band at Kennywood Park. Lorry started in 1968 working part-time at Progressive Music. When he graduated from high school in 1972, he began working there full-time, and eventually he would purchase this business. As a music retail expert, Lorry provided equipment for many professional groups and organizations, including The Temptations, Ben Vereen, Sergio Mendes, Beth Nelson Chapman, Dave Koz, and many others. This summer, Lorry will be working as an announcer at Disney World with Dance Masters of America for their national title convention. So, my audience, without further ado, let's bring Lorry onto the scene here. There he is. Lorry Yednak.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing great, Vito. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thanks. It's
Very
great
good.
to have you on the show, Lorry.
Thank you so very much. I'm honored to be on.
Thank you. It's wonderful. And I when I put this little promo out, I see how many people view the promo that we have for you, and it's an amazing number that people that have tuned in, because so many people between Progressive Music and your work there, and eventual ownership, and then also as a drumline. You've been in that business forever too, so you have tons of
A lot of people.
but I knew a few people, but you're way past me.
There you go. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's well deserved. You know what? I want to ask you, when you started studying music, and what was your first instrument? I assume drums, and what was your inspiration to start a musical instrument?
Well, when I was younger, like I said, my father played piano, and I always just gravitated to the drums. That's just what I wanted to do. I always had that rhythm in me and gravitated to the drums. And sooner or later, my parents joined me up into the McKeesport drill team, and I played in the drum line there, and I just kept going from there. Just kept going and going.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this: at what point would you say that music became your passion?
Oh, I'd probably have to say once I was in high school, you was in marching band, you were in concert band, you were in the orchestra, you were playing the musicals, and I started marching with drum and bugle corps, and it just went from there. It just went from there.
Uh-huh. When you were at McKeesport High School, was Joe Krysick still the director there?
Yes, he was. We had Joe Krysick was my director. He passed away in an airplane crash with his family my junior year.
Oh.
My senior year, where the band directors were Dick Hiller and Ron Polak. And it was a great bunch of teachers at McKeesport in those days. Karen Donaldson, Larry Gibson, Ed Falk, Cliff Jones. There was a ton of great teachers. And probably the biggest mentor to me out of high school was Ron Polak. Ronnie told you that every day, this is how it's going to work, and this is the trick, and this is what you do. He had it dialed. Ronnie had it dialed in. He had it dialed in.
Yeah,
I learned a lot from Ronnie.
And he was a funny guy too.
Oh,
he was a trip. I remember him.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
Yeah. I wish I could remember. I wish I would have known that you were going to mention it. I'll think of the story and tell it later if I can remember. But there was a story when we were hosting a region band one year, and we had all the band directors in the room, And this is when there was a problem with the water in McKeesport. I forget the name of the.
That was Giardiasis.
Giardiasis was in the water. So he reaches down in the middle of the meeting with these music teachers. Now this is region based. It's like a sixth of the state. Yeah. And he reaches down and gets a gallon jug, and he has water in it, right? And he says, if any of you are upset with your mother-in-law, I have the perfect solution. this is water from McKeesport.
There you go. And it was a great joke, and it was harmless, and that's what I mean. He was good. He was great.
And I also, I remember him well, but you mentioned Dick Hiller, and Dick Hiller eventually, I know he taught for a while at Thomas Jefferson, and then he taught at West Mifflin.
Right.
And he was responsible for writing the alma mater at West Mifflin South High School.
Oh,
so first graduating class was like around 1964, and then when I started, he was the guy that actually started me on baritone horn.
Oh, there you go.
In 5th grade.
Yeah, he was a great guy. He
And
taught was the McKeesport for the jazz band, the marching band, taught theory. He was wonderful. Great guy.
I learned a lot from him about harmony and about chords and things like that, because, of course, at that time I played the accordion. I played pretty well. I couldn't play piano well, but I could sit down enough to play chords and things like that. And Dick Hiller taught me a lot at that time about chords and tunes, and structure, voicings, different things. So that's interesting that you mentioned that he was one of your teachers as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk for a second about your dad. I know, in fact, I have a picture I want to show the audience, and this is a picture right here. And this is the Army. This is the Army Jazz Big Band during World War II.
Right, that was the 309th Armed Band. They were in
that's sitting at the piano.
Fort Meade, Maryland. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Your dad's first name is Loris,
right?
Loris, but you're Lorry,
right?
Because as you mentioned to me, that was his nickname, Lorry, and then so when you were born, they just called you Lorry.
Right.
Named you Lorry. Okay, but his real name was Loris. Anyhow, that's him playing with the Army Jazz Band at during the World War II era too. That's amazing.
Yeah, that picture is in. I think that was when they were in Cairo, Egypt. They got transferred from Fort Meade, Maryland, to Cairo, Egypt.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, here is. So then I want to show you this picture here. You tell us about this picture.
That is the 2nd Marine Air Wing Band from Cherry Point, North Carolina. When I do the sound reinforcement and the things for Tournament of Bands, Tournament Indoor Association for our Atlantic Coast Championships, we take over the Wildwood Convention Center. And we have color guard competitions, majorette competitions, dance competitions. We also have a jazz band, high school jazz band competitions, where we have about 10 or 12 jazz bands come in, they're adjudicated. And we always bring in a guest band. And this is who our guest band was this year. This was the 2nd Marine Air Wing Band from Cherry Point, North Carolina.
Wow.
And
great.
They play an hour set, then we do some awards, and they play another half-hour set on Friday.
Okay.
Saturdays, they do a side-by-side with jazz interpretation, and kids can sit down and play with them. We probably get about 75, 80 kids involved in that also.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a great experience for the kids, too.
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay. And then this is another Marine Air Wing Band, I believe.
This was the 3rd Marine. You got to keep track of these. This was the 3rd Marine Air Wing Band that flew in from Miramar, California. And the base that they're at is where they filmed Top Gun at, Miramar, California.
Right.
These guys flew in the year before that, and then they rocked the house also. They're special. They do a wonderful job, and I think it gives the kids another avenue to see if they want to be in music. They don't necessarily have to be a band director. They could join the service and be in one of the service bands, or the drum and bugle corps, different things like that. So there's opportunities for them in the military to get into music.
Right. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I was thinking about that myself, because being a baritone horn player, euphonium player, the pretty kind of in-demand instrument, a rare instrument.
Sure.
That's usually in demand. And I was, of course, in college during the Vietnam conflict, and they had a lottery at that time.
Right.
I think my number was pretty high. If it was low, I would have gone into the Army and joined the band in a heartbeat. But I ended up with a high number, so I wasn't drafted. But I was ready to get into one of the bands if necessary, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And then this picture here, let me show you this one here.
That's the president's jazz ambassadors out of Washington, D.C. That was their there was a guy missing. There was their sextet that they brought down, but that was the actual band that my dad was in. It was in Fort Meade, Maryland. It's had a couple different names to it, but this was the actual band that my dad had played in during World War II. But these guys they came down for the weekend and they did the guest spots and all that, and they did the side-by-side with us also. And great guys, great players, treat the kids great, and the kids love it. You know, parents love it too, you know.
That's awesome. And I think I had mentioned to you that I had a guy in Naples, Florida. He's now just since, I think, moved back to Washington, D.C. area, but he was his name was Bob Powers, and he's a euphonium player in the Army band in D.C., President's Own, for 31 years.
Yeah.
And you know, there were a lot of military musicians that retired down here in Naples, Florida. A lot of great musicians in this area, and I've had, you know, put on different concerts and things and used a lot of them. And so Bob he still performs around the world, tours as a solo euphonium player. Yeah. It doubles on trombone as well. But anyhow, those guys were the what we say in Italian, meglio di meglio, the best of the best.
Yeah, you got that right. That they are.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, that's their living. I mean, and they, sure. You know, they get to practice 8 hours a day and doing what they do, and then they perform 50 times a month. And I mean, it's just, they're always at it. And it's like anything else. If you do it enough, you're going to become good at it, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But, so tell me about, let's talk about a little bit about, you know, the early part when, you know, you mentioned this Mike Blazer, and I saw him in your bio, and how he encouraged you, and you went from there, and about the drum corps, whole drum corps part of your life.
Well, when I started, like I said, when I began, I started marching with the McKeesport drill team in McKeesport, and it was run by Helen Tawsey, who did wonders for kids in McKeesport. And as a side note, she was the first secretary that actually worked at Progressive Music.
Oh, really?
When it was founded. So it kind of, everything spins around. But I wanted to move up from that, and I started marching with the junior drum corps, and the Sundowners, and we were in Westinghouse Valley Sundowners, and our corps hall was in Wilmerding, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. And Mike taught the drum line there, and just from there it went. It's like, this is the pad you need, these are the sticks you need, you don't do this, you should do this. This is how you write this. This is why I do it this way. And you just start soaking it up, and you go to see these bigger drum corps, and you know, you see bigger and bigger and better. So then after I put a few years in down there, Mike was teaching the Pittsburgh Rockets. So I joined the Pittsburgh Rockets. I marched down there for about 3 years, and that was the senior drum and bugle corps. So you're marching against the best there were. So you'd be traveling on the weekends, and I like the traveling and the rehearsal time and just learning more. And he was a great mentor. It's like, nah, don't do that, do this. I tried that, it don't work. Here's how you tune the drums. And still to the day, his family, my family, we're still friends like it was just yesterday. And the guys that I marched with back in those days, now you're talking back in the 70s, we're still best friends. That's still like a brotherhood. You did that, you traveled together and you marched. And but yeah, Michael, he was still to the day, he's got me into judging, all kinds of things. He was my mentor.
And you mentioned another Michael Coomer.
Yeah.
What was your tie-in with him? Because he was eventually the dean of the music school at Duquesne. But prior to that, he was a percussion instructor there, and I had him as a student. Yeah. As my percussion instructor.
Yeah, he also taught down at with the Pittsburgh Rockets, and Mike was more into the orchestral end of things like that. So I learned a lot of things about the use of the pit when we were getting into things like that. In later years when we didn't march, he'd come out and he'd adjudicate drum lines that I had, and Mike would adjudicate drum lines I had. But yeah, I was always with the Michaels, Yeah. But, both great guys, and Mike Coomer went on to be dean of School of Music. Yeah.
Yep. That's interesting.
Yep.
And then there's another guy that you mentioned in your notes here that I want you to talk about. John Fisher, who was also a Duquesne guy, and he was also a fraternity brother of mine. Although he was older than me, I wasn't in school at the same time as him, but we were both in Alpha Phi Delta fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
But John, tell us about your connection with John Fisher.
Well, John, we ran into John when John was a band director in South Allegheny for years, which was just right across the river from McKeesport, Then he was coming down giving drum lessons at Progressive, and he was playing at the Twin. He was the house drummer at the Twin Coaches. So anytime he needed his drums fixed or drums cleaned or drums tuned, hey, Lorry, you need to do this, I need that. So I'd always take care of him. Then he moved to Thomas Jefferson High School. And same thing there, Progressive Music followed him there, I followed him there. But the funny thing was with John was a habitual chain smoker and black coffee. He'd have cigarettes and black coffee going all day long. He kept the high energy when high energy wasn't even a thing. John was it. He was always going. Great bands, and he was more or less my drum set teacher. And just learn about stuff playing in the groove and playing with those Music -1 records. The band would play without the drummer. Back in the old days. And play tracks along with that stuff. But yeah, then. When John retired, he came and worked for me at Progressive Music, and he taught the pit over at Baldwin for a couple of years too. And we always had a great time. It was always a laugh. It was a laugh.
Any particular stories that you remember about John?
Well, John, John, he'd call down the store and say, "Hey, I need this stuff." It's like, okay, well, we'll get up to you tomorrow. And he's like, okay. So John finally come to work at Progressive. So. The first day he's working the counter, the phone's ringing off the hook. People are coming in. The band directors need this. The band directors need that. He looked at me and says, when you always told me you guys were jammed up, I thought you just didn't want to do nothing that day. I didn't really realize you were this busy, So that
takes his own medicine, huh?
Yeah, it's like he was like, oh my goodness, you guys weren't lying. I have to apologize, But he was a great guy.
Yeah. I knew John pretty well too, and I actually helped him publish his snare drum book.
Yeah, he has book 1 and book 2. Yeah,
we helped him all through all that whole process,
Yeah,
but yeah, that's interesting connection there. And so then let's talk about you in the education field. When I think I mentioned in the bio that the first school that you instructed at was at Penn Trafford High School under Emery Toth, and I remember him from PMEA, of course. I remember Emery Toth. He's a big guy, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, and then there were a lot of schools that you were involved. I know that Baldwin was. We'll talk about them last because. I want to talk about them last because if we're going to show a little video when Baldwin was in the Macy Day Parade in 2006, and you were doing the whole drum line and the percussion for them. We'll do that, but talk about some of the other experiences that you had teaching in the different schools. You were even in, I think 3 of the schools were in Maryland.
Yeah, I did a lot of traveling around the schools in the area I taught at. I started at Penn Trafford with Emery Toth. I taught at East Allegheny with Bruce Laufer and Delmas Dowden. I taught at McKeesport with Karen Donaldson and Barb Petron. Both were Duquesne grads. Then we hooked up with John Eckstein out of Hagerstown, Maryland, and we taught at Clear Spring High School. We taught at Boonesboro High School in Maryland. We taught at Williamsport High School, which are all around the Hagerstown area. Then we followed John out to Springford High School, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. Then the main 2 schools that we were always at was like Elizabeth Forward and Baldwin. And the success we had at those 2 schools all go back a lot to Gary McKeever.
Yep.
He always made sure we had what we needed. What do you need? What are we doing this year? What are we cooking up? Like he never micromanaged us. It's like, what do you mean you need 30 pairs of cymbals? You know what I mean? It was like, if you need 30, we'll do 30 pairs of cymbals or something. But He was a great guy. He always made it happen. He never tied my hands. It was like, yeah, do what you want, or it never said the drums were too loud. You know. But I enjoyed teaching. It was always great I always liked taking the programs from zero to where we could get them that they could be winners, they could be successful. I like building it from the ground up. Here's the basics. This is what you do, and this is how you get to that level. And those are things that I learned from, like I was saying, like Mike Blazer. Those are things you watched him do, and you listen to him do, and you can't run before you crawl, so you got to do this, you know. And
Sure.
That's a ton of my success. And you know, I put in, I think, 3 or 4 years down at the University of Pittsburgh with Don Hauer. So those were great years down at the university, also, you know.
By the way, you mentioned at East Allegheny you worked with Bruce Lawfer, and friends with him on LinkedIn, and he mentioned exactly what you said, that you know, when he saw your promo on there, and then he said about you teaching when he was band director at the East Allegheny. But he also mentioned that you were a percussionist when he was conducting the McKeesport Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, I played a few times. Yep.
Yeah. So I didn't even know that. I mean, I never knew this about you. I'm learning, you know, more things that you did than I ever would have imagined, you know.
Yeah. But the funny thing with East Allegheny, too, is one of my students, when I was teaching the drumline there with Bruce, is Justin Roscoe. He's the band director there now.
Oh, is there now? Oh, geez.
So it's once again, it all goes full circle.
That's right. Well, that's an interesting thing. And, you know, you remember Ben Holstein, who was at Penn Hills for a long time.
Yep.
He had a student, same thing. He had a student, and I couldn't tell you his name because it's been so long ago, but he played trombone like Ben did. They both played trombone. And this student, when Ben retired from Penn Hills, the student became the band director there. Ben asked me to write a piece, and I wrote a piece, and I called the piece for band. It featured the 2 trombones, and I called it Full Circle.
Yeah, there you go.
That was the title. That's the title of the band piece, because, you know, it did. It's, you know, it's amazing when you see that all happen.
Yeah.
And actually, it happened in where I was in West Mifflin. My band director there, this was after Dick Hiller, was Henry Sokolowski. And he was my band director, and he was the head of the department. And eventually, I became the band director at West Mifflin Area High School and head of the department for 25 years.
Right.
So, you know, that was another full circle example, you know. But interesting. So, Baldwin, and you say Gary McKeever, of course, was the late Gary McKeever was the band director there for how many years was he there?
We put in Gary retired, and we stayed another year, about 20 years.
20 years. You know why? I'm saying this because I remember myself. I think it was the first year that I was band director at West. We had West Mifflin South and West Mifflin North, and around 85, we brought these 2 schools together and made one. And I was the band director for the first couple of years. And you know how they had exhibition football games before the regular season started?
Yeah.
Our exhibition game was with Baldwin, at Baldwin. West Mifflin at that time was a AAA team, the WPIAL. And of course, Baldwin was a quad A team. And our band, putting the 2 bands together, we probably had about 150 people on the field, including the girls. Eventually, it became about 200. But when we started, it was about 150. We went to Baldwin. Don Huckle was the band director then. Yeah. And of course, the Highlanders, right? They were the Highlanders, and they all wore kilts.
Yep.
They wore the kilts. There were 400 people on the field. I mean, seriously, 400. And I'm like, are you serious? You know? I mean, that was amazing to me. And,
they had the Highland dancers, they had the bagpipers, they had this, they had that. They had everything.
We were a little bit humiliated that day.
That was a big group back in those days. Yep.
Yeah, it was huge. But so I have a little video I want to show, and this is when you were doing all the percussion and drums for Baldwin High School under Gary McKeever, was band director in 2006, and you guys went to the Macy Day Parade. So here, let's watch this video together.
Right.
In more local news coverage this morning, a local high school band will take part in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The Baldwin High School band left for the Big Apple earlier this week. About 2.5 million people are expected to line the streets of New York in order to watch the parade. Baldwin will make its appearance around 10:40 a.m. The parade will start at 9 a.m. and you can watch it live right here on Channel 11.
Hold on, I gotta stop. Let's turn around for a quick minute and look at all the marching bands and the color, the flags beginning to work through. People from Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh area, the Highlanders from Baldwin High School beginning to entertain the crowds just behind us. How are you?
Good, nice to see you guys.
Did you come to the parade as a little kid? I know you're from upstate New York, near where Dave's from.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, a little further up from the Syracuse area.
Very cold area, a little snowy. I know, this is my first time at the Macy's Day Parade. Yes, and this is a treat. I've always watched it on television. I love it. This is fabulous. The weather's a little crummy today, but the spirit is awesome. There's a lot of energy in the streets. The kids seem to be having a good time.
So now we hear that there's basically a guiding light Thanksgiving that's going to be going on a little later.
Spontaneously, this is happening.
So who's going to be there?
So Ricky Palgold and Gus from our show.
Right.
Beth Ellers plays Harley.
Right.
She took this off. Yeah, that's right, I heard.
And marching now at Harrow Square, Pittsburgh's Baldwin Highlanders, halftime favorites at Steelers games. In fact, the last band to play Three River Stadium and the first to march under the Monday night lights in the Steelers' new home, Heinz Field.
And now it's time to score another one for the six-time Tournament of Bands champs as they make their Macy's Parade debut with Dance Bacchanal under the direction of Gary McKeever.
There you have it, huh?
There you have it, huh?
I think I saw those 30 sets of crash cymbals. You know, it's interesting too. I'm looking at the sousaphones. There were about 12 sousaphones there, it looked like. And, you know, when we were doing the band back, years ago, I can remember the football team, the coaches, they would send people out to scout the football teams so they knew who they were going to play the next week and that kind of thing. And they'd come back and tell us, the band directors, how many tubas they had in the band. That was how we determined how big their band was.
Yeah.
How many tubas.
That's one of those unknown secrets, you know.
Yeah, 12 tubas. You're going to be a little bit nervous.
Yeah. But yeah, we were pretty well loaded up that year. But what people don't realize, when you send your tape in to get accepted, it's from the band the year before. So there's a year's wait, you know. So some of these kids are like, man, we're seniors. Can we flunk out so we can come back and go to the parade or whatever, you know, because they got us into the parade, but they weren't in the parade, you know. But yeah, it was a great day. It was a great day. Band did good. The color guard was good. You know, we were great. My wife did the color guard, so we had a great time with that.
Diane.
Yeah, Diane did the color guard. So it was great. It was great. I still remember the day Gary called me and said we made the parade.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. It was,
is that where you met Diane?
I met Diane when we were teaching Elizabeth Forward High School, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, she was doing the majorettes and color guard, and I was doing the drum.
Color guard for a long time. She was
Oh,
involved.
yeah. Yeah. Color guards and dancing. Yep. Perfect.
It's all the dance things, and I remember used to have they used to have the dance recitals or whatever at West Mifflin.
Yep.
You could rent the auditorium there, and you would be up there doing this, playing the music and doing the sound and all that stuff. So that's interesting. Wow. So tell me a little bit about. Now, here's another thing I had no clue that you did, and that is play drum set and play with bands.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Working it. The bands, the Castaways, that was Marlene and Vince Dimzik. I played with them for a while. And I played with a couple other bands, the Dukes, the Musical Nights. But progressive music was always kind of like the clearinghouse on a Friday night or a Saturday morning. It's like, hey, do you guys have our drummer sick? You know who can play drums? It's like, oh, yeah, I'm open. So, a lot of things like that went on where, you'd pick up the different gigs and that on the weekends from different bands and stuff. Yeah, I played some nights I was playing on Wednesday night at the Viking, and another night I was playing Friday night at another club, and Saturday you were playing a wedding or two. So you were, going around doing all that. But yeah, I enjoyed playing.
As long as I've known you, I had no idea. I could have auditioned you for week 3 at some point.
There you go. There you go. But yeah, I enjoyed playing, But yeah, I picked up a lot of spare jobs, or if I was playing, I'd be passing on to somebody else to take the job, So working at Progressive, that was a place everybody would call, hey, a drummer,
And you also mentioned, I remember reading in the bio about the hot metal band, which was Devin Smeal. I don't know if he put that together, that group, and he played trumpet. He's, of course, a West Mifflin. At one point, he was the band director at the high school. He's now, I think, in the middle school. But anyway, you mentioned Kennywood Park.
Right.
So tell me about that. I have a picture I'm going to put up here too.
That was when they do their Festival of Lights at Christmas time. You go over and play Christmas carols, and there you go.
Yeah, you're playing drums, and Jim Stillwagon Sr., also known as Squirrel, was playing sousaphone there.
Yeah.
And of course, I went to Duquesne with Jim and his wife Natalie, and taught both of their boys at West Mifflin as well, because he lived in West Mifflin. That's an interesting picture. I haven't actually talked with him in a long, long time, but they were great people.
Yeah.
And I see Jim, his son, on Facebook a lot. He's on there a lot. He's an avid fisherman, I think.
Oh yeah, he's at that big time. There's a couple nights he played over at Kennywood too. We'd play during the Festival of Lights, and we'd play Christmas carols. We'd play polkas. We just had a great time over there. It was
do they still do that at Kennywood?
Yeah, they still do it. Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Live music.
Wow, that's great. And so, all right, this is fun. You know what? So, progressive music. When I say that, there's like 10 things that come to mind. Okay, number one, Matty Shiner, because I studied with Matty there. And this is the older building. It was at 801 Walnut.
Yeah.
Right. And the second thing that comes to mind is Evan Brumman, because of course he told so many stories about studying with Matty at Progressive, and of course he went to McKeesport High School like you did. And I remember one story that Evan told, that he said he was walking in to take his lesson, and there was a stairwell. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you recall. And there was a long wooden stairwell, and he just walked in the door and come flying down the stairwell, tumbling down with his trombone. That's another student. And Evan looked at the kid and says, "Oh my God, I'm the next one to have a lesson. Are you kidding?"
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. But Matty was, Matty and Ed Shiner, all those guys that taught. I mean, they wouldn't hold a job for 10 seconds today in this world. But, I mean, the the way they beat us up, and they beat us up in a lot of different ways, emotionally, mentally.
Yeah. Nowadays it'd be like you're out of here, you know.
Yeah. I remember that Mr. Shiner used to call me the sewing machine. I'm not sure quite why, but he did. And so then the other thing that comes to mind is Tony Petrocelli. And there were a number, you probably know this, there were a number of owners of that business.
Right.
Do you know who all those owners were?
The first owner that started Progressive Music is Ed Garbett after the war, and he became the band director at McKeesport High School. But one of the first employees that he hired was a gentleman named Bill Schultz to be a repairman.
Okay.
Needless to say, Bill Schultz went on to be the president of Yamaha International Band Instruments in America. Then after that, he bought Fender Rhodes, Fender guitars, Rogers drums, and he became the owner of Fender. And that all came out of Progressive Music at McKeesport.
Oh my!
So there was a couple other people, Ed Guglielmi, who was the band director out at Bell Vernon at the time. He hooked up with Yamaha, and he went with them to Fender out in California and all that stuff. But when you go to a meeting at Yamaha, and I'd go show up in the meeting, or Tony would show up there, all the people from Yamaha would call us like the McKeesport Mafia, you know, because everybody was from, you know, like Bill Schultz was from McKeesport, Eddie Garbett was from McKeesport, I was there, Tommy Koneski at the time, he was from McKeesport, you know, so yeah, there were some pretty hefty guys that came out of Progressive Music. They went on to own Fender musical instruments and run Yamaha musical instruments. So, you know, it was pretty heavy hit.
So when I was, I guess, a student and going for lessons there, I knew Tony Petrocelli was, you know, one of the owners at least, and ran the operation at that time. And he was an interesting guy. He really was. And when I became, you know, I was the head of the music department at West Mifflin, and I would call if the band director came in my office and said, I need, you know, a pair of drum mallets or bass drum mallets or sticks or whatever. I'd pick up the phone immediately and call, just like one of those guys. Yeah. And we need this ASAP. You know, the game is tomorrow. We need these. And Tony would say, you know, or you would say, or Tony would say, we'll get them right up to you. And I remember one time, Tony came up with a box truck, and he had a shirt and tie on. I wore a coat and tie every day to West Mifflin, and he came up with a shirt and tie on, and he got out of this box truck with the stuff he was bringing me, and he said, looked at me, and he said, I'm glad to see someone else wears a shirt and tie.
It would be 100 degrees out, he'd have a shirt and tie on.
Yeah, that's right. And I said, you know, it's interesting because you're driving a box truck. I'm teaching students. And I said,
yeah, but, always a shirt and a tie.
And the one thing I remember about him is that he spoke very slowly, and he would, if the bell didn't ring, and I said, Tony, I have to get to my class, he would be talking and talking.
It'd be there for hours.
And same thing on the phone. I mean, if you got him on the phone, you could be on that phone for an hour with him.
And when he talked on the phone, he'd stand with his eyes closed talking. You look on the phone, it's like, is he awake? Is he asleep? But he always talked, he had his eyes closed all the time. We always used to laugh.
Right. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Good guy. Great guy. And he did a lot for a lot of people, just like you did. And I mean, you were there when we needed you, you know. And then, like, one of the things, I mean, obviously, all of the educators in our region knew of you and Progressive Music because of you servicing them, both with instrument repair work and also with the recruiting programs, and where you provided the instruments where families would rent the kids to begin and so forth. So that was a big thing. And but also, besides that whole part of the business, you had another part of that business where you supplied, people would call professional musicians would call and, need equipment, and you would provide different kinds of, whether it was sound equipment, whatever you were providing to instruments,
Right.
in some cases, or whatever. Tell me a little bit about that.
That was, a lot of that stuff I worked with on those bigger acts. Like, for example, there's up at Nemacolin Woodlands, Joe Hardy had a big to do for his investors and things like that. So they had the Temptations in, Ben Vereen, Sergio Mendez, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. They had all these groups, come in. And Flip Benak, which is Benak Sound Productions, which Flip that I've known for 40 years, and his dad, Benny Benak, kind of like my dad and me and his dad and him, he was doing all the rigging and the sound and all that stuff. And he's like, we need drums, we need congos, we need this, we need that. So, we had it all there. You take it up and set it up and meet the groups and all that. But the funny story out of doing that one up there is Sergio Mendez.
Oh.
I'd walk up to him, Mr. Mendez, how are you? Everything okay? Call me Sergio. Okay, Mr. Mendez. No, Sergio. So, I'm a lot of respect. Sergio Mendez. This is, I love this stuff and all that. So when we were looking at his rider for what equipment he needed, Flip Benak called me and he says, hey, Lorry, we need a Fender Rhodes 73 key piano with onboard built-in Apple computer.
Oh, geez.
So we're like, I got a Fender Rhodes, but it doesn't. This is when all the infancy of the computers were coming around and all that stuff. So I said, I got a 73, and we'll take that. And he says, no, that won't work. We need this. So here we found out that Sergio Mendez owned the only two of these pianos ever made.
Oh.
He had them custom made. So he's like,
right.
Well, of course you can't get them. I have the only two. So you'll have to rent them off of me, and you'll have to fly them in and fly them out. So we had to rent his own gear off of him, fly to the net. It was like, so who was stupid there, though? But he was making money off of his own stuff,
Oh, that's funny.
And you deal with the Temptations, and this was like the original Temptations. They're like, they're feeding us dinner at 5:30. All the crew, you guys are invited to eat dinner with us. So we sat down right with them and ate dinner. I mean, great people. You see them. Ben Vereen, his performance up at Nemacolin was electric. I mean, when you're that close to see them, it's just, it's wild. It's neat.
Oh, that's great. What great experiences, huh?
Yeah.
And memories that you have, huh?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple other musicians that you came in contact with. One in particular, I remember Tommy Turk, the trombonist.
Yeah.
And I remember he got shot in a liquor store in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, Tommy was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, Tommy was with that whole crew of like Hud Davies, Flo Casanelli, Ronelli. He was into that jazz idiom thing. And there was the guys from like Clerton and Turtle Creek and then down in the valley, that whole area in that time. And he moved to Vegas. He played in Atlantic City for a while, but then he moved to Vegas to play. All the jazz work was out there.
Right.
And he was in a liquor store, and I guess the liquor store got robbed, and they said, everybody down on the floor, don't move. And he might have moved or flinched, or somebody got antsy, and that was the end of that.
Wow.
Got murdered out in Las Vegas, but great trombone player. That whole crew, Hud, Bob Poland, him, Spider, Flo Casanelli, those were the guys.
Yeah, you mentioned Lou Cardo too, as drummer and drum teacher, huh?
Yep, Lou. He taught down at Progressive Music for years, and he was Bobby Vinton's drummer when Bobby Vinton was, rocking it back in the late '60s, early '70s, and he went out on the road with Leslie Uggams. And then he bought the Blue Diamond Music Studio, recording studio in Las Vegas, and that's when Lou settled in. He was doing all the different work and recordings and different things like that,
Uh-huh.
So that's where I don't know if Lou's still around or not. I know his son got into the audio thing, and his son was a house sound man at like Caesar's Palace or something like that.
It's funny, you mentioned that Hud Davies, and I remember when I met him, he was an older man.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's it. I didn't know anything about his past. But tell me just a little bit about him, because
you look at Hud. Hud would, he was a great guy. Do anything for you. He could play, but here you talk to him. Here he was on the road with like Benny Goodman.
Yeah, Benny Goodman. That's right.
He was on the road with Benny Goodman. It's like, and he was from Turtle Creek. You know what I mean? You can't fathom, like, you're from Turtle Creek. How'd you hook up with Benny Goodman? You know what I mean? But a funny story is when Baldwin one time went out to California on a trip. We went to the NAMM Museum, the National Association of Music Merchants. They have a museum out in L.A.
Oh.
And they had the first synthesizer that the Beach Boys used, and they had a horn from John Philip Sousa. And you walk through this one room, and there's a big mural up on the wall. And they're like, "Oh, this is a mural of Benny Goodman's band." So I walked out, and I walked back in, and I'm looking, and there's Hud up there on the wall playing drums with Benny Goodman, like in the 40s.
Did he play drums?
He played drums.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what are the odds? Here I am across the country from McKeesport in California, and there's Hud in the 40s up on the wall with Benny Goodman playing drums.
Wow.
Yeah, he has some stories, but I can't tell you those stories.
I'm sure. I didn't, like I said, he was an elderly man, and that's all I knew him like that. I didn't, I met him a few times at the store and things like that, but I had no idea. I didn't know what he played. I didn't know what his history was until you mentioned it to me.
Still played good drums. Had a heck of a roll going too. He still played brushes. He could still lay it out.
That's amazing. Wow, a lot of interesting people that you ran into there. And you mentioned Flo Casanelli, and I remember meeting him a long time ago too, and his band, and we exchanged kind of recordings and different things. I mean, he was from Clareton. The Rondinellis were all from Spider. They were all from Clareton.
Yeah.
I knew all those folks, and that's interesting. Well, I have one more video I'd like to show to our audience. And before we show this last video, do you have any other stories you'd like to share? I know you have a ton, and we could probably be here for a week. But
be here for a long time. I got one quick one. We talked about Matty Shiner, but Eddie Shiner, his brother, taught fabulous trumpet players all over the country, and he taught upstairs at Progressive Music. So years and years ago, when I was younger, the phone rings, and I'm like, "Hello, Progressive Music," and the person on the other end said, "Hello, this is Doc Severinsen. I'd like to speak to Edwin P. Shiner." That was Eddie's Edwin P. Shiner, and you can hear Doc Severinsen saying that, Edwin P. Shiner.
Sure.
So I'm like, it's Doc Severinsen, So I said, "Hold on, he's upstairs teaching. Let me go get him." So I go flying out this door. I go up the steps to the second floor. I knock on Mr. Shiner's door, and he's giving a lesson. I said, "Mr. Shiner, Doc Severinsen's on the phone. He needs you. He wants to talk to you." And Eddie was like, "Oh, he's a pain. Did he say what he wants? I mean, he always bugs me. You know what I mean?" So here I'm like, "This is Doc Severinsen, Right. So I said, he wants to hook up with you, I think. He says, "Yeah, he probably wants me to give him a lesson or look at his embouchure or something like that. Just get a number and tell him I'll call him back later when I get time." So I go down the stairs, and Tony was there. Tony's like, "What did Eddie say?" And I said what he said. He said, "Well, don't tell Doc Severinsen that. Just tell him, give us your number, and Eddie will call you as soon as he could." So it was just, funny things. If you tell somebody these stories, they don't believe you, but it's like they happen, they happen. Yeah. But there's Eddie telling Doc Severinsen, don't bug me,
That's amazing. Yeah, those guys they covered the globe, that's for sure.
That they did.
Well, Lorry, let's show this last video that we have, and this one really focuses on you, on your drum line, and you as a drum instructor, what you did with these kids. So let's show this video here. Okay.
All right.
And there it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That was one of those where Gary said, "You want to do what?" And I'm like, "We're going to build this rack."
Yeah, that thing, the machine in the middle, and the 8 drummers on or whatever there were. I mean, that was amazing. So that you had built just for that.
That was built just for that. Two of my ex-drummers, Mike Geisky and Dennis Young, I said they were in the steam fitters unions, electricians and welders. I'm like, "Here's what I need." They're like, "You need a what?" So give us a week or two. So they built the rack, and then we hooked all the cymbals to it and the toms and everything like that. And there was wheels on it. It could spin and they can play on it. And it was funny. We went to the first show and nobody saw it because Baldwin was a group 4 band. We were always on pretty much last. So we came out with that, and everybody in the stands was like, "Wow, what was that?" So the next show we go to, we pulled out of the trailer, and like you see people starting to take pictures of it, and they want to take measurements on it and stuff. So we're like, "Well, you can't do this." So the third show we went to, we kept it covered up with like tarps, like it was like nuclear missile or something, so they couldn't copy it. But the kids were great. I mean, and my success was always at the schools I taught at. I always had great band boosters behind us that were taking care of the equipment, loading stuff that I didn't have to deal with that, so I could worry about teaching the kids. It was all about the kids doing well, and just always had that backing behind me. That was a luxury that a lot of guys don't have, but we had that at Baldwin and Elizabeth Forward and McKeesport and East Allegheny. We had great people behind us.
That's wonderful. That's good to hear.
Yep.
I don't know how it is today. I hope it's the same, the going on there today. I don't know. But
some places no. Yeah, different world.
Yeah, different world. Well, Lorry, it's been wonderful having you as a guest on the show. I mean, a really remarkable career that you've had, and how many people lives you've helped and touched, and I mean, it's been wonderful. Very, very congratulations to you. You have a lot to be proud of.
I appreciate that. Coming from you, that means a lot to me.
Well, thank you. But no, seriously, it's just great, and I'm glad I got to know you a little better through this whole process too.
Yeah.
If I need a drummer, I'll call you.
That's it. I know how to play those Italian songs,
And it's a short drive to Naples too.
North Carolina. We'll do a one-nighter. Here you go.
That's right. There you go. Sounds good, Lorry. Thank you again, and you have a great evening.
You too. Thank you, Vito.
All right. Take care.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye. And there you have it, another episode of Memories of a Musician with Lorry Yednak. What a career and what a guy, and what a number of memories he has and stories, huh? Just goes on and on. It's amazing. So looking ahead, next week we have another actually a close friend of mine, Tim Milko, who was a former student of mine in music technology for all 4 of his high school years at West Mifflin Area High School. And Tim's going to be on next week, June 18th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tim was also, I ended up hiring, there were a number of students that I had that I ended up hiring through the years. And Tim was one of those that I hired as a roadie with the band and became an assistant engineer under Ed Dukestein. And then eventually when Ed retired from his position as chief engineer, Tim Milko took over as chief engineer for We3 and also for all of my recording projects moving forward from that point. Later, after that, Tim became the guitarist and an additional vocalist for the group. Tim is also a music educator in the West Mifflin Area School District now, teaching elementary general music. So tune in next week. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Memories of a Musician. Thank you, and you have a great evening.